time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body. Scoring net, knocked away.
Welcome in to another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Spoonie and Jake are here with us also, but joining us for part 2 of our Get to Know the Celtics Media series, it's Abby Chin. Welcome, Abby. How you going?
I'm doing well. It was sad to see that Marcus Smart highlight diving on the floor, the Cobra. No more a Celtic.
Do you think that Smart's been here long enough that like he's kind of grandfathered into that and we can leave that content as it is, or would you go about updating that content now that he's moved on?
No, I mean, you had the KG clip in there. You had Rondo. Right. Marcus, I believe, will go down as a Celtics legend eventually. So, I mean, I know in the pantheon of Celtics icons, he's not up there in the rafters, obviously. But, I mean, Marcus and what he gave to the team in the 9 seasons he was here, never missing a playoffs, the Eastern Conference Finals, a finals appearance. I mean, you can't discount what Marcus brought to Boston.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, let's just get right into it. Actually, first, how are you, Abby? I mean, we haven't really seen you since the Celtics season ended. What have you been doing to keep busy during the offseason?
I'm doing well. I am just living that mom life, hanging with the kids. Unfortunately, and part of that today, I didn't get to go to the Kristaps Porzingis press conference because my son had a doctor's appointment, and that's what happens in real life. So I have just been watching everything go down from seemingly afar and just trying to scrape my chin off the floor and wrap my mind around everything that's going on.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into it then. Just starting with your reaction to the Marcus Smart trade. Obviously devastating for fans all around, but from what I've heard from listening to media folks, pretty devastating from a media standpoint as well, given that he seemingly was one of the better interviews across the team.
Yes, my initial reaction was purely selfish, and that he is the best interview on the team. And he never said no. He was so professional and so respectful of everyone's time. And I said this to someone recently. He's the only player I've ever covered who one Christmas, he gave everyone Christmas cards with a $50 gift card in it. And I mean, everyone from the media to the staff at TD Garden to security. It was just a really thoughtful thing that he did. And that is not to say and even mention all of the work that he did in the community and off the court. So I'm going to miss Marcus Smart. And that's one of the tough things about these off-season trades is that you don't even get to say goodbye. He's just gone. I mean, I guess it happens in the season too if it's at the deadline and you don't see them the game before. But it's just there's no closure until the next season and you see them again. And I just cannot imagine him in a Grizzlies uniform. I know all the photoshops and stuff, but I'm not here for it yet.
In that vein, is this, in your time, I think you've been with NBC Sports Boston since 2013. So you've seen a lot of players come and go, especially in the Danny Ainge era. Is this kind of the most difficult departure you've seen, or at least the player you've had like the strongest connection with or the most time with since your time with NBC Sports?
Yeah, definitely. But you're right in that a lot has changed. I was thinking about it the other day, especially when you see that photo of, almost exactly 10 years ago when the Celtics had that press conference with Chris Humphries, Keith Bogans, and then who was the other guy that's in that photo? Anyways, in the trade from the Nets. And then my first year was Brad Stevens' first year. And that first training camp was at Salve Regina in Rhode Island. And I just remember Gerald Wallace, literally sleeping on a towel on the floor. And I was like, where am I? What's going on? Avery Bradley being the point guard. And because Rajon Rondo was still coming off of the knee surgery. Mm-hmm. And it was just, it was a different time. That was a very different season, 25 wins to go from that to then, the NBA finals last year and all of the Eastern Conference playoff runs in between. Yes, a lot has changed, but largely Marcus Smart was that constant. And now that is gone. And Jaylen Brown is the longest tenured Celtic on this team, I believe. Which is
correct.
Crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And Al obviously has been here through so much, but he left, so it doesn't count.
Yeah.
I know. It's all of a sudden like hearing Jordan Walsh do his interview and be like, I'm so excited to talk to Jalen and Jason and learn from these guys. And I don't know about you guys, but I still think of them as maybe it's because I don't have kids. So, but so Jalen and Jason to me are the closest thing I probably have. From to me, they're still 19.
I would say Jason is definitely still 19, so I can see
Yeah,
that.
checks out.
Yeah, look, I might be turning 30 tomorrow, but I'm not quite old enough to have a 19-year-old son. It would be definitely pushing it. But big, how did we get here? Big shoes to fill, obviously. And we definitely missed you at the Porzingis press conference because I think these press conferences are often quite dry and boring. And I feel like, Abby, you do a great job of bringing some light and some color, getting at least like some kind of different response from some of these guys. But what did you see the Porzingis press conference today?
I didn't get to watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he said all the right things. I think two things. Number one is what this trade and this move signifies to me is that this team it truly belongs to Jason and Jalen, and it is up to them, whether that is taking over a bigger role as a leader and stepping up inside the locker room, but then also on the floor. The ball is going to be in their hands even more. They're going to have to run this team and be the ones to take them over the hump finally if they can get to banner number 18. So that is what this trade effectively does for the Celtics. And then Kristaps today, I think that those were some pretty big smiles on the faces of Brad Stevens.
Oh my gosh, Brad looks so much happier than after the draft. Like doing the interview with Mark and Chris Forsberg, he looked like he was about to die. And I was like, he looks so much more well rested and happy now.
So much better than after the trade deadline, or
after the draft. Yeah,
after the draft. Yeah, he looked a little peaked then. I think he was obviously tired. He said he hadn't slept for days. It was funny too in that interview. He was like, usually, when I was the head coach, once the second round hit, I was out. I came and talked to you guys, and then I went home. Whatever happened. But not anymore. But Kristaps, the clips that I saw said all the right things, was genuine about it. I really am curious to see how this fit looks on the floor, but we won't get to see that for a couple of months here. But I think that he is a very different player than the one we saw with the Knicks, not only on the court, but also in a maturity level. And I think that trade from Dallas, from everything that I've heard, really hit him hard and humbled him a lot and really forced him to focus on his game and developing that side of himself. And so hopefully, clearly those results were the best season he's ever had in the NBA. And as he said today, he is coming into his prime, his body, his mentality, everything is there. And so to think about that, it's on the right timeline with the Jays. To me, that is exciting.
Yeah, he seems pretty stoked coming to the Celtics as well.
Yeah.
I heard his interview with Forsberg on the Celtics Talk podcast earlier today, and he didn't hold back in saying like he's genuinely up for signing an extension with the Celtics and can see himself with Boston long term. So we're talking about that fit and talking about Zinger potentially hanging around long term. Looking forward to this upcoming season, Abby, what are you most excited about coming into this season? Is it that we might have a legitimate big three for the first time since Pierce, Garnett, and Ray Allen? Is it Tatum going into year 7 and maybe starting to hit his stride from a maturity standpoint? We've got Derek White finally anointed as the starting point guard, or is there something else that comes to mind?
I hear footsteps, so before I start your answer, you can chop it right there.
No worries. Well, Spoody, why don't you answer that question?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's year 7 Tatum, dude. Like, he's taken a step every season, and like Jason Tatum coming into his prime is probably the biggest thing that will get the Celtics over the hump for banner 18. And like, how can you not be excited? Like, he finally turns into an elite rim. He finished at the rims like at Giannis levels last year, right? And then that's with like a saber or like a log attached to his left hand, right? So you got to think like if the rim finishing stays, and man, if he just starts shooting threes at like 38, 39% again, like what is this team? We're going to win the title.
Yeah. So I went back and watched a bunch of the Dallas playoff games against the Clippers, or a bunch of the, I want to say games. The Porzingis made field goals, and I'm going to put a video up on Twitter about it at some point in the next couple of days here. But you go back and watch all the buckets from KP against the Clippers in the playoffs. Like, I know a lot of people are emotional about the Marcus Smart thing, not only just because obviously what he means to the franchise spiritually, but the on-court fit. I can totally understand having some concerns about the overall passing, the playmaking of the team. But you go back and watch KP and what he's able to do in the playoffs against like Zubats and Kawhi and Paul George, bombing from 30 feet, driving closeouts, fake handoffs, getting to the rim, mid-range, in the middle of the zone. Like, if you can't see the vision, you either I understand it's an emotional time, but you got to go back and watch it. Like, this guy is a elite offensive weapon. Like, he was literally an all-star before he did his ACL. So, like, for him I loved hearing that from you, Abby, about how that trade from Dallas really helped change his perspective on how he approaches the game going forward. And you could definitely hear that in his press conference today, saying, I'm coming into my prime. My skill is at an all-time high, but the way I mentally see the games at an all-time high, and to bring that to Boston, I missed the pressure of New York. He saved himself a little bit by saying, not that Dallas and Washington didn't have pressure, but yes, completely different world when you are the betting favorites to win the Eastern Conference and the NBA Finals. But I can see the vision with this elite offensive talent on a team where, if you're going to pick one reason why the Celtics did not win the title, it's because of the offense breaking down in Game 4 of the NBA Finals, and the offense in crunch time, especially against the Heat. And right. So it's just, I think, could take this offense to a completely new level while also still doing a lot of the defensive stuff that Rob and Al bring to the floor.
I'm curious, what do you guys think about the fact that the Celtics not looking to run it back? Brad eagerly going out to make this move that it reportedly didn't work with Malcolm Brogdon. Fine, we will pivot, and I am going to get this done. We are bringing Kristaps in. I know that we have made the Eastern Conference Finals 4 out of the last 6 years, but that's not good enough. Something needs to change here.
Yeah, real quick, Kristaps, you did not have to include Washington in that
I know.
caveat. I've been to a game in DC, buddy. It ain't the same as Boston or New York. I can tell you
Great
that
for
much.
Celtics fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I would say I was extremely excited when it was the Brogdon deal. And then when I went to bed expecting Malcolm Brogdon to be traded for Porzingis and woke up to Marcus Smart being traded, I was like legitimately shocked. But part of me thinks like you've not been able to get over the hump for 6 years, 7 years, really, because Tatum, 6 years, I guess, because this was Tatum's 6th year. Something maybe just fundamentally has to change with this team. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure it's the right call, but I appreciate he's willing to take a risk, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it was necessarily a reluctance to run it back, but more so just a really solid trade opportunity presented itself. And objectively, as emotionally attached as we all are to Marcus Smart for Kristaps Porzingis and 2 first-round picks, even though we traded one of them back 1,000 times during the draft the other night. Objectively a good trade, which is like, that's my mantra at the moment as I try and let go of the Marcus Smart experience and try and move on. Just knowing and speaking to neutral fans of the NBA and people who aren't Celtics fans who all agree and echo the sentiment that it is objectively a good trade. That's what I'm hanging my hat on at the moment. But yeah, to answer your question, Abby, I don't necessarily think it was a reluctance to run it back. What do you think?
I think that it was interesting. To me, the Celtics it's not that they were listening to outside noise or heard or feeling any sort of pressure from the outside that this window is closing or what have you, because I really believe when they say that no one's putting more pressure on themselves than them and the people inside the building to get to banner number 18. And so I just feel like not that something had to change, but we talk about it all the time. Purgatory in the NBA is the worst place to be. And after the season ended, in my mind, I said, even though it feels like we keep coming here, at least it's the Eastern Conference Finals. It's not the Washington Wizards, that aren't even making that are battling to get into the play-in tournament, right? And so there's different levels to the purgatory. But to me, there's still no question that they continued to ram their head against a wall. And so something needed to change. I am so sad that it is Marcus Smart, to be completely frank. But I really am curious to see how different this team looks on the floor coming in October.
Yeah, I'm convinced that the Smart trade was coming anyway. I refuse to believe that just appeared out of nowhere within the hour between the Clippers deal falling apart, because they could have made that deal after the midnight deadline, but they needed to accelerate it because the Clippers deal fell through. And Joe, our co-host, our Kiwi correspondent, had a question for you. There was, I guess, maybe a thought that maybe Smart's presence, as amazing as it was maybe too overbearing, and that with him on the team, it was never going to truly be Jason's team and or Jalen's team. Do you think there's any credence to that potentially?
I don't think it's due to any bad intentions.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the same thing that we saw with Kemba when he was here, is that Kemba came in saying all the right things. I'm here to set up the Jays. That's what I'm here to do. But you still have Kemba Walker on the floor, and you're going to use that asset. So, yes, I believe that this move clears the way unconditionally, they're unquestionably, for the Jays to take control of this team. Whether that had to do with Marcus Smart having too much control, I don't think that's the case. But I think that that's clearly what is happening here and has happened now.
Something else happening in a neighboring city that is potentially impacting the Celtics is that the Sixers are looking like it's reportedly they're going to trade James Harden and not re-sign him, which is great for all of us who love the Celtics and hate the Sixers. Potentially, there's also a lot that they could get back in a deal with the Clippers that might actually bolster their lineup around Joel Embiid. Jake, you've got all the details on this trade. You've been the least busy of us, I guess, this morning and had time to dive into the details. So what do you got for us?
Yep. So my initial reaction was, okay, because the initial reporting is the Clippers are kind of like leading the charge as far as trading for Harden. So I'm like, oh, I know that there's been some rumors about Paul George. Is that what it is? But what I have found out is that whoever trades for Harden cannot extend Harden. So it's not the same as the Porzingis trade where the Celtics now have the ability to extend him. I don't know exactly why that is, if they missed a deadline or for whatever reason.
I think it's because he went there in a trade. So
yeah,
you lose the bird rights.
Okay. This is why we have the professionals on the podcast. And so whoever
I don't know what happens in the new CBA. I have not read this.
Oh my,
none of us do.
Document.
It's a foreign language.
It's in my TBR pile.
So whoever trades for Harden will not be able to extend him, and so it's a 1-year rental of a guy that's injury prone, etc. And so you look at the Porzingis deal, like a team that could actually extend Porzingis. The Wizards got back the 35th pick in the draft and Tyus Jones for Porzingis. Like, there's obviously a massive value gap between those things. The other sign, the opt-in and trade I could find was Chris Paul when the Clippers traded him to the Rockets, and that was for Pat Beverly, Sam Dekker, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Darren Hilliard, DeAndre Liggins, Kyle Wiltjer, and a 2018 first-round pick. So, like, the returns for these opt-in and trades are really bad, and because you have absolutely no leverage. Mm-hmm. So there's two things. One, clearly this is going to weaken the Sixers on some level, because Harden, if he does come back to the Sixers, I'm sure he's going to be very motivated to play some of his best basketball.
Saw through a 7-game series, a motivated Harden through 7 games in the postseason. I mean, not even that. And believe me, I was in the building for games 1 and 3 or 4, whichever one it was.
Yeah.
And he was incredible, but he could not sustain it.
Yeah, I would imagine that motivation. Harden doesn't have the best track record now, right? This is 3 trade requests in 3 years. So we got 2 things: Harden leaving, and now does this start to push Embiid closer and closer towards a trade request? I guess, Abby, the East kind of feels like it's falling apart around the Celtics in a way. Like there's rumors of Brook Lopez leaving the Bucks. Even if he stays, that team's quite like aging. And it's always been like the Celtics have been contending, but Tatum's still entering his prime. Jalen's about to enter his prime. We've added another, fringe all-star in the smack bang of his prime. Like other Celtics kind of as down as everybody was after the Heat series, the Celtics kind of feel primed to be the preeminent team in the East as per usual.
I mean, they're still the odds-on favorite to win the championship on some sites, even over Denver. But you said it there, Jake, in the Heat, and God knows what's gonna. Are they gonna get Damian Lillard? I mean,
that's the bullet we're trying to.
Do they need him?
Please no.
So you don't know. This is a crazy time. Free agency coming up at 6 p.m. Eastern here in America tomorrow night, and the Celtics, not giving off vibes that they're done here. So I agree with you in that the East is still wide open. And to me, the Celtics still have the most talented team in the East as of now. This is one of the things that I love about the NBA, though, is that you never know. I mean, superstars, and that is something that I think the new CBA is trying to limit a little bit more, is that player empowerment and superstars demanding movement. But it's crazy, it's like the weather in the Northeast. You just gotta wait a few minutes and then it'll change. So it's pretty crazy.
Are we sure Harden leaving the Sixers is a good thing? I mean,
that was my point too.
You were in the building for that game 7. Like, what was the look on Embiid and Harden's faces in that third quarter when Tatum just hit like 3 straight step back? Like, could you tell, oh, these guys are quitting? Because it seemed like that on TV.
The game 6 in Philadelphia, when Jason was terrible for the better part of 3.5 quarters. But then you're right, that one step back that he hit after that, you could see it on his face. Like he knew. He's like, oh yeah, I am that guy. I can do this. And then I remember talking to Rob Williams post game in our walk off in the back hallway, and he just had that look on his face. And I asked him, like, did you guys know? Did you feel that? And he didn't want to give any billboard material, but in his own Rob way, he's like, we got this, and so it definitely was, you could feel a difference after that.
Yeah, amazing. It's certainly going to be interesting to see what happens with the Sixers. Obviously, we're praying for their demise as Celtics fans. So we're watching
right, and I talked about this purgatory. I mean, we could be the Sixers who can't even get out of the second round.
Exactly. Well put. And Jake and Spoonie are doing a live stream for the free agency negotiation opening up deadline. I'm sure there's a more succinct way of putting that around 6 p.m. East tomorrow. So keep an eye on our YouTube channel for that. Now, we're going to move on to the meat of this podcast, the Get to Know the Celtics Media segment. We ran episode 1 with Bobby Manning of CLNS a week or 2 ago. That was really well received. So obviously, we're very thankful to have Abby here for part 2. Now, Abby, we had you on the show back in 2020, I think just as the bubble was starting, right around then. And it was right around when you were just reinstated in your role at NBC Sports Boston after briefly losing it due to the pandemic. And we covered a lot of your early career then. So we don't want to necessarily go back and repeat those same questions. But just to rehash for any new listeners, and Abby, please stop me if any of this is incorrect. So you started off interning at KCNC Channel 4 and 760 Zone. Yes, and 760 Zone Radio, the Fort Collins Coloradian and 850 KOA. And then made your UPN. Yes. Then made your UPN 20 Denver debut as a sideline reporter. All of that correct so far?
Yes.
I question the credibility of the website that I got this information from. So
I don't know if I did sidelines in Denver. Maybe. I'm sure it was for like a high school production. Did we get into it? So yes, I went to school at the University of Colorado. The internship with the radio, that was awesome because radio, it was in Denver. And it was the time of the Shaq and Kobe Lakers, and the Nuggets. If they had Melo yet, they weren't great. For some reason, they sent interns, and I was in a locker room holding a microphone for Shaq, and I just remember him sitting in a locker, and he is just so massive, and he was still taller than me, even though he was sitting down, and I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. I can't believe I'm doing this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And then the reason I hesitated about the sidelines, I'm not sure. I did that in college, but I did after I graduated with my undergraduate, I did postgraduate studies for writing for a newspaper. And that was when I figured out that I didn't want to do sports at all. So, I didn't want to do news at all.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Sorry.
So really sticking it out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So they're like, what was the tipping point? I suppose maybe you just touched on it a little bit, but what sort of funneled you into the sports specific region of journalism?
Well, I grew up loving sports and playing sports and watching. And I didn't know that you could just do sports until I took a sports broadcasting class in college. But like I said, so during my postgraduate degree, it was for newspaper writing, journalism. And I was an intern at the Denver Post. And I was working, because interns work on the holidays. I was working on Thanksgiving. And there was a big crash up in the mountains in Summit County. And this is paraphrasing, I'm not exactly sure, I don't remember the story, but there was a family of 4 and 2 of the family members died, and they sent me to the hospital to speak to family members or people who knew them. And and we knew their names because they're on the police blotter. And I went to the front desk and I said, I'm here to see Joe Smith. And they're like, oh yeah, they're on 3rd floor, room, whatever. And which they shouldn't have given me that information. I didn't tell them who I was. Because I knew their names, that's where they sent me. And I just couldn't bring myself to go in the room. And so I knew at that point I didn't have it's a Brad Stevens word, but the gumption. Like if at that point in my career, I should be like, hey, I'm with the Denver Post. Can you give me some information? And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It was too tragic. And so that was the day that I really realized that probably wasn't the right path for me. And I was like, I can do just sports? Yes, I would love to do that.
I think few would have the gumption to walk into that room.
Yeah.
So you're definitely not alone there. So you joined CSNNE in 2013, initially covering Northwest's Pac-12 football games, then the Portland Trailblazers,
Well,
and
that was
then the Boston Celtics.
CSNNW. CSN Northwest, yes. Versus
Okay.
Northeast, where I am now.
Got it. Okay. All right. This website needs to update their
Come
their
on,
facts. And then you joined the Boston Celtics in 2013-ish. And we've been, obviously loving your presence on the sideline and in the studio since then as longtime Celtics fans. You mentioned that you went to the University of Colorado. How has that given you an advantage in the press room with Derek White compared to your peers?
Well, I will preface it by saying Derek White is the nicest NBA player that I have ever met. And so no one really needs it in with Derek White.
Yeah, right.
As I hear
Okay.
more footsteps. So I apologize. My children are having trouble putting themselves to sleep.
If you need to mute and go at any point, feel free. We all have kids, so I understand.
But no, I do try and point out the Buffalo connection constantly. We were in Oklahoma City this year, and I was like, Derek, you see those buffalo? It was like a painting. And then when Deion Sanders got hired, we talked about that and if he's going to start doing some recruiting and things. But he arrived in Boulder after my time. So we were not there. We didn't overlap. And we do talk about Colorado. But like I said, he's the nicest person. And so he will talk to anyone and be kind and professional and respectful about it.
Yeah, great. We had his dad on the podcast. That's our claim.
He's
to fame.
amazing. Don't you
Yeah,
know?
dude.
Such a nice
Great
guy.
Twitter
So
follow.
Yeah.
He's great.
knows Paul.
Okay, yes, I'm going to excuse myself. I'll be right back. But you
Sure.
can keep
Yeah, of
giving
course.
my bio if that helps.
Yeah, great. Okay. We might have to revisit that website, which also said that Abby's 5'5". So just that standing next to Shaq, holding up. I don't know if you could reach up to Shaq's face with a microphone at 5'5". Anyway, suffice to say, the website, I don't think the information is particularly credible.
Do you
I don't know,
guys
should we
think
talk-
Deion's going to bring in a lot of recruits or what?
I was going to say, do you want to talk about Philly at all anymore until Abby gets back? What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Like-
Well, sorry, you go ahead, Spinny.
I was going to say, if he goes to the Clippers, what game changer? How would they get better in a trade with the Clippers if Harden goes there?
The trade that Bobby Marks for out is like Marcus Morris, Norman Powell, and Batum. They don't get better.
No, definitely not.
They don't get better.
I feel like they kind of do. Like,
But
there's
now they
just
have
more...
literally now they have
Okay,
0
sorry.
point guards.
Sorry,
Oh,
sorry.
we're back. We'll save
We're
that.
back?
We'll save that.
we'll
Hashtag
get him
mom
back.
life. Hopefully, supposed to go back in there at 9:30. We'll see what happens.
Okay, no worries. We'll definitely wrap up by then. So Abby, like, you've covered a few different teams. How does this play into your fandom of the Celtics? If you still like, have you developed any fandom towards the Celtics? Like, did you also lose your mind when Derek White put that ball back in to force Game 7?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I have such an incredible story about that. I'll tell that first, and then we can talk about fandom. So we're in Miami. After the first round of the playoffs, because we don't have the games, I still get a post-game interview, but it has to be off the floor, which is why I talked to Rob Williams in the back hallway and Miami as well. So where we are in Miami, we're underneath the bowl. There's a big hallway to go to the locker room off of the court, and we stand at the other end. So I was watching the end of the game with the like golden oldies dancers of the Heat, which was emotional enough in itself because it's like, are these people gonna die? Like the end of the game got so intense, and everyone is just living and dying with every single shot. And then for some reason, I think we had the scoreboard monitor up, and that's the feed that they were getting. And so all it did was show the basket and the hoop and the rim, and I saw the ball go in, but there was no. I couldn't see the shot clock. I couldn't see who did it or what happened. All I heard was outside everyone cheering and then nothing. And then out of nowhere, my photographer, his name is Barry Alley. He is a veteran, has been covering this team for decades, just comes streaking behind me with this huge camera on his shoulder. He's like, we won! We won! We won! Derek! And I was like, what? Like, I had no idea. And then, like, my mind completely shifted into car crash mode for like, okay, who are we talking to? What are my questions? What exactly did happen? How is this? What are we doing? And Barry is just like shooting down the hallway, and you can see the shot that he had of people celebrating as they're going in. It's not in focus because he was just like, ah! And you can hear him screaming, ah! He lost his voice for a week afterwards. He was so
Amazing.
excited. And I had never seen that side of him before. And I was like, oh my God. It was incredible. So, and Barry, like I said, a true professional, like, you talk about fandom. He never lets that really come out. He shoots RF for all of the games, which means he's shooting all the people in the stands, and then it goes back to our truck via a signal. And I just had never seen that side of him before, and I've been working with him for 10 years now, and I was like, whew, wow, this is tough.
Awesome.
So, but there's no question. You become a fan of the team, you become a fan of the players, of the coaching staff, the people, you become a fan of the people, I would say more so. And then for the team specifically, my job is so much easier when they're winning and so much better. Everyone's so much happier and wants to talk to you and is willing to talk to you, and you can joke around. I talked to Forsberg about this in our post-game podcast throughout the playoffs. This playoff run felt so different from the one a season ago. The one from the season ago felt kind of serendipitous. You know, it wasn't, they had turned the season around. And so everything just felt like icing on the cake, and making it to the finals was the cherry on top. This playoff run was a slog. And it was just like, they were like, it was supposed to be the Eastern Conference Finals at the very least. And so the fact that they struggled against the Sixers, it was so disappointing. And then it just felt like the roller coaster was more down than up, whereas in the previous, the roller coaster was a thrill ride, and it was so fun. This was just like, stress the entire time. So there's no question I'm a fan, and just from being here and being here so long, and then just working with Tommy, I'm a fan, and Cedric Maxwell, I'm a fan of those teams as well, and those people who I have had the wonderful opportunity to meet and work with, and those legends are truly legends on and off the floor. And so there's no question I bleed green now, and I know that does come through sometimes, but I do also, you know, I'm not an unbiased journalist. I think that it has sailed. So.
Fair enough.
It's a fun job, though.
Yeah, how could it not be? I would, yeah. I mean, I'm obviously a huge fan already, but like, I would be totally sucked in. Like, if I was like doing reporting for any team other than the Lakers, I would definitely adopt that team. How could you not?
Yeah, it's the best. It's one of the best jobs in the world. and to travel and be in the arenas. And it's incredible. So yes, it's hard not to be. I think it would be harder to not be a fan than to be a fan.
Well, so you are now up to your, how many coaches have you interviewed now? It's definitely Doc, Ime, Brad, Ime, Joe. Is that 4? Or
no, just Brad, Ime, and now Joe.
Okay. Oh, well, I forget how long Brad was there for. So obviously Joe presented a different interviewing experience, maybe we'll call it. I think he did his Joe Mazzulla version of the Bill Belichick, it felt like, throughout the year. How do you go about approaching interviewing someone like Joe? I guess, yeah.
It is an evolution. And so at first it was kind of like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. I just want to say Joe is a different person off camera. He's funny. He jokes around. He also, like, that competitive spirit is not a joke to him. While he is funny and can be sarcastic and deadpan, like Scal will tell you, playing in that pickup game that they do at TD Garden with the staff before home games, literally broke Scal. He was like, I am mentally and physically broken, and I never, ever want to do that again. And like, so the competition in Joe, that's so real. And so I think a lot of his media persona stems from that. But it's something that obviously falls more on me to get the best out of him. And my questions changed over the course of the year. It needs to be more open-ended. It needs to, not talk about anything but basketball. That was a hard one for me to learn. Because I like to talk about Father's Day, or Father's Day doesn't happen. Halloween, he did not want to talk about Halloween. Like,
the Royals.
He's a very religious man,
right,
I believe.
Yeah.
The Royals was so good.
You learn something different every time. You roll with it. And he was never, and I know it didn't come off great on camera, but in person and in real life, he was never, and it never, even when we were together, it never felt disrespectful. It's just, he was answering his questions the way that he was answering my questions the way that he believed they should be answered. And he never said no. He never didn't show up. He never refused to do an interview. And so I give him credit for that. And it's a lot. Like, pre-pandemic, we talked to head coaches 3 times a day. And there were moments on the road. So you talk to them at shoot around, pregame and postgame. And there were moments with Brad Stevens where those were 10-minute sessions every time. That's a half hour of your day, every game day, talking to the media. And that's a lot. And so for a first year head coach who's never had to deal with any of that, I don't blame him for not enjoying every moment of that.
Yeah, I truly believe Joe thinks he's being funny with like most of like the way he answers stuff. He's just so deadpan. But how would you compare Brad, Ime, and Joe as interviewees? Like, who's the most forthcoming? Like,
Ime was the most forthcoming. Ime did not care.
Zero filter.
And those were those early moments with Ime where he was calling guys out. I was in the room. I just remember being so uncomfortable. I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And then a month later, I was like, he knows what he's doing, right? And then a month later, he's like, I don't care. I'm going to do this. And I was like, okay, let's go. Like, let's ride. I was on board. But so Joe is much more in the Brad Stevens line of thinking, and that he would never call out a player by name to us publicly while he may be holding them accountable and saying very different things inside the locker room. He would never say those things publicly. The difference to me, Brad had spent so much time in the college game and recruiting, and he can really, turn it on and turn on that charm. And whereas Joe just hasn't had to do that, and I don't think cares to do that. And so it's definitely a different experience every time. And a learning experience. There's a learning curve to it. But I'm just so grateful that we get that opportunity. And those are exclusive conversations that not everybody gets, and it's my job, and it's incumbent upon me to get the most out of those. And so you can't blame Joe, can't blame Brad.
I think anyone just being unapologetically themselves is really
Yeah.
endearing. Like, as long as they're not just inherently a terrible person, I think it's a really endearing quality. As I think Jake has some hardcore drilling going on. In the
Yeah,
Is that a foghorn?
yes, this is okay. I'll ask this question, and then this is drilling. I'm at my parents' house. It's a whole thing. But
We're all
Abby,
having family issues.
I know, right?
today.
Yeah. So Abby, there's going to be, unfortunately, sometime in the future, a Mike Gorman-sized hole in the broadcast team. Is that something you would potentially put your hand up for? You do little bits of pieces of play-by-play in the middle of the sideline, and then there's an overlap, and you've got to be like, as Jason Tatum makes a pull-up three, and you've got to jump into that. Would that be ever something that you would consider doing? Because I think you could potentially be great at it. And I'll hang up and listen.
We started talking about Marcus Smart. Now you're going to bring up Mike Gorman? What are we?
I know.
I can't emotionally take that. And it's not next season, so we know that. I would love to kind of be able to step into that role sometimes. I honestly don't have any reps. I've done one game, and I don't know how I would get them at this moment. And I know that's one of those work smarter, not harder. But with the kids, any time that I am off the floor, it's really devoted to them, especially with our travel schedule and things. But it's absolutely intriguing to me, and I would love to help out when necessary, but I know that is not a realistic goal of mine at this moment. I did one game. It was with Eddie House before he really joined our team at NBC Sports Boston. It was post-pandemic when they were trying to figure out different feeds and do different things. And it was such an interesting, crazy experience. I learned that, broadcasting for over a decade, you really do gain a lot of skills. And so I feel like I was able to carry it, but I definitely filling the shoes of Mike Gorman is something that I wouldn't even imagine or fathom.
An interesting experience, I think, describes being next to Eddie House at basically any moment.
Yes. And that was before he was covering the team every day. And it was the game that it was 2 seasons ago in the middle of December in Minnesota, and just coming out of the pandemic, really, but people, all the teams were still dealing with COVID. And so it was the junior varsity Wolves.
I know the game you're talking about, right? Way too well.
They ended up losing.
Yes.
And so it was a crazy experience, not knowing who was on the floor, who was going to play that night. They didn't have any of their stars. And so Eddie and I are just basically vamping and trying to talk through what ended up being a crazy and depressing game in the middle of a December in Minnesota. So it ended up being a really fun experience. And I'm so grateful that I got to do it. But it also taught me how far I have to go in that world.
Sure. Is there another area of the industry that you sort of have your sights set on? Because I think a lot of people would get to your position, Abby, and feel very satisfied with that being the height of their career. I think it's a very great position to be in and a very respectable one. That said, is there a step up from your perspective? Is that even something that you're thinking about at this stage? What are your thoughts there?
I do think my perspective, I'll speak for myself personally, has changed a lot since coming to Boston, and now that we have been here 10 years and we own a home, my kids are growing up here and going to school here. So it's not something where I can just pick up. And obviously, yes, the dream job would be to work for a national broadcast, whether that's TNT or ESPN, but it's not realistic for me right now to even dream about moving to Atlanta to do that, or moving. Connecticut isn't that far away, but I am so lucky and grateful to be in this job and in this role, and in this moment, it's still fulfilling to me, and especially with everything and the growth that I've had on the personal side. And so I know everyone is the 5-year plan and all of that. And I just, right now I am enjoying the moment. And that is really something, a luxury, I think, that I have, and I'm grateful for it. And, if something else comes up and I need to find some more silos, and that's kind of my goal for the summer, is to figure out where maybe some of my other interests lie. But I love my job, and I love that this is something that I get to do. And what's interesting to me, and this is how we started this conversation, is that it changes every year, even if it's not, the calendar doesn't change, the team changes, the personalities of the team changes. Next year, the Celtics have an entirely new staff on top of the Kristaps Porzingis trade and try to navigate their way without Marcus Smart. So no 2 days is the same. I'm constantly learning, which is something that I love about this job, and something that I talk to people about every day is, you're learning about a different team, a different player. The game is different. And so there's never a dull moment, especially in the NBA. And I'm just so thankful to be where I am and that I get to do this every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, watching from afar, like we turn on the TV rather, and it's the Boston Celtics. So for us, you are just as much a part of that product as Jalen or Jason or any of those. So if you were to find another interest and move on, you'd leave a chasm among fans everywhere, I'm sure, and you'd be dearly missed. Before we let you go, we mentioned earlier that the free agency negotiation period is opening up 6 p.m. tomorrow. We will be doing a live stream on our YouTube channel for that. I'm kind of throwing you under the bus here, Abby, but do you have any wild predictions for what might occur in these sort of imminent opening stages of free agency tomorrow?
In relation to the Celtics?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
or not.
whoever.
You know what? I want to gauge your guys' interest and price tag for Grant Williams. Celtics reportedly extended the offer, so he is a restricted free agent. The qualifying offer. That's the word I'm looking for. So how badly do you guys want Grant Williams back, and what are you willing to pay?
Spoonie, don't you have a running bet with Forsberg on this?
Yeah, we do. So I thought he was going to, this was when Grant was playing really, really good. So I said he'd come back for 4 for 60. Forsberg was at 4 for 56. I think those numbers with the new CBA, this is pre-new CBA.
This isn't,
So I think they're going to be deflated quite a bit, but I think the new non-tax MLE is like 12 million. I would keep Grant around for $12 million
He's not
a year.
going to take $12 million.
You don't think?
I don't know.
That's kind of, I think, reportedly, right? That's where they were when they were working on an extension before the previous deadline. I think he wants at least 15.
I hate how the NBA has turned everybody into like the whole conversation to this cap CBA conversation, and we all have to have these boring. We can't keep Grant because of the CBA. It's so lame, and it feels like that's going to be the reason we don't keep him, because if it's 15 or under, they should, like, Grant Williams on a 3 for 45. Everybody in the chat see that? Maths is getting better. 15 times 3.
Nailed it.
If we could keep Grant on 3 for 45, like not only do we want to keep Grant, like that's a real asset. That's a real asset or a great contract that people would want to trade for. Versus you do a sign and trade, you're going to end up getting back like 2 second-round picks at best. And so,
which apparently have a ton of value all of a sudden.
Yes.
Everyone wants hoarding second-round picks.
Yes. If you go back to the trade deadline, like remember like all these picks that were getting done, it was like 5 second-round picks for
Crowder.
Jay Crowder.
Jay Crowder, Eric Gordon, all these guys. And
Yeah.
So like they clearly have value now. So it's like cool, but I'd much rather have Grant Williams for 3 for 45 than whatever. I think, unfortunately, I think my prediction is that they're going to have to like let him go, because I don't think that they want to hit the second apron, which is so lame to even say.
Open the checkbook. Come on.
And that's what Brad said today, is that he's been given the green light to spend as long as they do it smartly, obviously. I cannot wrap my mind around losing both Marcus and Grant from a media standpoint.
Yeah.
I just can't. It's just too much.
I have a question on that. How was Javonte Green as an interview when he was here?
Amazing. I love Javonte. Yeah.
I have a feeling that if we lose Grant, we'll be getting Javonte Green back. That would be my prediction. I'm not sure if you
I
saw the
want
Bleacher.
both.
Yeah. I mean, call it in, Brad. We want both. I saw today because people are
Are we
slowly
bringing
just.
Max Struess back too? We're just gonna
I hope
battle that
so.
out again?
I think the Pacers are going to be paying him big time, it looks like. But so Bleacher Report, people are starting to distill the CBA stuff now. And there's going to be, it sounds like a Harry Giles III. They're going to kind of like call it rule, where right now, if you to be on a two-way contract, you cannot have played more than 3 seasons in the NBA. But Tatum apparently lobbied for them to change the rule that if you miss an entire season with injury, then that doesn't count towards your eligibility, which now allows Harry Giles. Yeah, so now Harry Giles is actually eligible for a two-way contract again this year. So my prediction is that Harry Giles takes one of our two-way contracts and that we lose Grant, but we bring back Javonte Green. And I'm glad to hear that he has is a good media interview as well. But yeah,
Just a good person.
Great person, and another Tatum friend. So bring in 2 Tatum buddies, so raises our chances of retiring both.
It's his team now, right?
Yeah.
They're pulling a LeBron.
Yeah, look.
I'm kidding. That's not the way that Jason operates, for the record. Before we get
look. If we want to get
into trouble,
if we want to get into trouble, look, we have this Warriors pick. Steph Curry gets an injury. All of a sudden, we have the 16th pick. We draft Bronny James. We get LeBron on the minimum.
Man,
and look,
I would not cheer for LeBron.
I don't know. Look,
we're off the rails.
Runs too deep.
This is what happens in free agency. My brain slops
everywhere. Charlie.
Let's go. Yeah, exactly.
Speechless after that. I'm not sure.
Yes, I hope that we take the John Tomasi route and just ignore the CBA.
Oh,
sign Grant, sign everybody.
Abby, do you think Grant comes back if you had to make a wild prediction?
Oh, I just don't know. Because I feel like there is a team out there that could put out a qualifying offer that is just the Celtics don't want to match. I definitely think there is a cap that they are willing to spend there and would be willing to let him go if it gets above that. So I do think some teams might start wilding out for Grant Williams, unfortunately.
Well,
I want him back. I want him back. I think that he is a really important team when you look at the injury history of that front court and the fact that Al Horford is now 37 years old. But those are the realities of the situation.
That's young Ben and Spoonie. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
He's a young, spry, handsome.
Please, he's an old man. He's like 6 months older than me. So.
It's all relative. Well, look, all will be revealed in roughly 24 hours time. I think we'll wrap it up there. Abby, this was great. As always, it's always really fun chatting to you. I hope that you do get a nice long break during the off season and escape from the daily Celtics news cycle that we just cannot escape at this point. And we look forward to seeing you back on the sidelines very soon. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. And I apologize again for the little ones.
No.
Oh, no worries. No apologies necessary.
Apologies for the drill that was going through my house.
Yeah. All right. Shouts to Spoonie and Jake. Love your work, guys. We'll be back next week. Until then.
That KP picture.